Welcome to the Sunday services of Unitarian Universalists of Clearwater. I'm Margie Manning, Worship Associate for this morning. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Our congregational building is located on Tocobaga land, but today our congregation is here on Zoom as we honor the most vulnerable among us and keep our relationships strong within the constraints of our current situation. While this is virtual space, it is also holy space. Just as you would if we were sitting together in the octagon, please refrain from making comments while the service is going on so that you can stay focused on the message and out of respect for the speakers. All are welcome here, where we are united by our covenant to create a beloved community and to treat each other with respect, with kindness, and as equals, no matter our gender, race, sexual orientation, or economic status. All are welcome here, where we have no creeds. You may choose to worship one or many gods or deities, or none at all. Right now, we're in a period of ministerial transition, and we have a different speaker every week, a chance to hear about different theological viewpoints. Our speaker today is Reverend Kristina Spaude. She is staff chaplain for Geisinger Medical Center in Danville, Pennsylvania. Reverend Kristina completed 2 years of training at the Cleveland VA Medical Center before going to Pennsylvania. She's a graduate of Meadville Lombard Theological School, and before that, a graduate of Kent State University. Reverend Kristina lives with her 2 cats, Paisley and Harley. You'll be hearing from Reverend Kristina in just a moment when she offers our call to worship. But first, our prelude. Lord, what a morning.
These words come from Reverend Teresa Inez Soto. There must be fuel. There must be a spark, and there must be oxygen. We have principles and ethics, the fuel of the fire we would light. The spark is what passes between us, along with our aliveness, our possibility. Spirit moving in us is our clear invitation, embossed, addressed, sealed with wax, tied with ribbon. The spark is a seed of fire that must be treasured and tended, that it may bring the light. We have passion, the air without which nothing thrives, least of all the blaze of covenant, justice, and kindness we would illuminate, both with who we are and what we do. All of these an invitation to bring to life the blaze of liberation that is meant to light our way and to dispel the fog of cruelty and grief. It brings us instead to a hearth around which we gather to be nourished, energized, and warmed, and where we get ready to disperse, enlivened.
As I light the chalice, please join me in the reading of the chalice lighting words, which were written by Richard Fuchs. May the light of truth illumine our minds. May the spark of love set our hearts on fire. May the flame of freedom burn brightly within us, now and always. And now our opening hymn, Morning Has Broken. It's number 38 in the gray hymnal, and the words will be in the chat to the right.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the fresh garden, sprung in completeness, where God's feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the new light, Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
Each Sunday, we share joys and sorrows with one another. If you have a joy or sorrow to share, please email the church office by Thursday so you can be included in the next Sunday service. This morning, we open our hearts to Sharon Roach, who shares a sorrow. Sharon's wonderful husband of 26 years, Steve Colomecco, died on Sunday, May 31st, after beating survival odds with a stage 4 cancer diagnosis 3 years ago. Sharon asks that we keep her and her children in your thoughts and hearts. Sharon writes, I am strengthened by the loving support of my friends at UUC. Let us also remember George Floyd and lend our strength to all who are fighting for justice and equity, whether on the streets or at home, using bodies and voices to amplify the message that Black Lives Matter. We honor all the joys and sorrows unspoken that we hold in our own hearts, and I offer this prayer from Reverend Carol Thomas Sissel. Source of sources, giver of life, Divine One, lift me to the light. Magnify the whispering, sweet voices of my ancestors. You are loved. You are essential. You have the right to the beauty and the pain the world offers us all. Remind me that I too belong. Amen. Ashante. Blessed be. After a moment of silence, we will sing Spirit of Life. I am grateful for so much from Unitarian Universalists of Clearwater, from each of you, good friends, opportunities, spiritual paths, chance to answer a call to work for justice. In the last couple of weeks in particular, I've been so grateful for mission, vision, and the gift of language. In the past couple of weeks, many people locally and nationally may be hearing the term white supremacy culture for the first time they've ever heard it, grappling with what it means to examine the many obvious and not so obvious biases that benefit white people at the expense of people of color and those with marginalized identities. But here at UU Clearwater, many of us have been working through these constructs for quite a while. In our beloved Conversations and Black Lives Matters program, and through participation in FAST. We've been cultivating the skill it takes to have those courageous conversations, we've been willing to sit with our discomfort. Now, there is much, much more work to do, but we've laid a path at UU Clearwater, and we have so many trailblazers who are eager to pave the way for those of us who want to follow. Our congregation is able to offer these programs because of your generosity. Please know that when you write a check to UUC, you are making a difference in the world. Now, there are several ways to give on our website, in the e-octogram, and in the chat box for instructions. Now, for the offertory.
Tis a gift to be simple, tis a gift to be free, tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. Simple gifts, simple gifts. Life is full of simple gifts. Yes, it's full of simple gifts. Tis a gift to live simply, tis a gift to live free, to find the path on which you ought to be. It's really very simple once you start. Just follow the Spirit, just follow the Spirit in your heart. Your heart. When true gratitude is learned, when wisdom is something for which we yearn, and turn each wrong to right, we're closer to a gift to just sing, to celebrate life in every living thing. So raise your voice in song, whether great or small, for music, 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 music. The simplest gift of all. Simply live life as a song.
And it's time for our musical interlude.
This is Corner of the Sky from the Broadway musical Pippin by Stephen Schwartz, piano arrangement by Mark Hayes.
And now, Reverend Kristina Spaude.
Every year, I anxiously await Easter, my favorite holiday to preach on. But over and over this spring, I found myself called to reflect on the Passover story and writing related to its themes. It seemed to resonate particularly viscerally and emotionally for me this year, even as my life hasn't changed significantly due to the novel coronavirus. The three parts of the Passover story that resonated strongly for me include the plagues. I think that might be obvious from the coronavirus. And a reflection on what needs liberating that would have caused so much suffering. The marking of the homes of the members of the community to distinguish themselves and keep them safe. And the wandering in the desert that follows liberation for the Israelites. And while the first question is a good one, we're going to leave that for another sermon. Among the plagues sent by the God of the Israelites to Egypt to liberate the people from Pharaoh's enslavement are frogs, lice, boils, a thunderstorm of hail and fire, locusts, and death of firstborn sons. To be spared from this last plague, God commands Moses to tell his people to mark their doors with lamb's blood, so that he might know which homes to pass over. That is, in order to remain safe, the Israelites must stay in their homes, separated from each other, and mark their homes as they have been instructed. To be a people, to be known as a people, they had to shelter in place and follow guidelines. What identified their community as a community was how they were, in fact, not together at all, and could not be together through a terrifying time or risk the death of a child of one of their community and their hopes for liberation. Then the last part of the Passover story also resonated with me, the wandering in the desert for 40 years. Perhaps this was so striking to me because at the Level 1 Trauma Center and Regional Medical Center where I work, which is normally hustling and bustling with people of all ages coming to the hospital for outpatient appointments, visitation, or hospitalization, suddenly things became very quiet. It was eerie, really. Walking through the hallways mid-afternoon, it was as vacant as a hospital becomes sometimes around 10 or 11 at night. And there's also the parallel with transitioning to online worship. Liberation from our buildings was sudden, as liberation had been for the Israelites. But liberation was not the end of the journey. It continued every day since, as it had every day before. Some people were undoubtedly lost on the journey, afraid of the work of liberation and longing for familiarity. They may have returned to Egypt or elsewhere. They may have just given up. But most carried on their way together until they got to the place where they were promised. The desert or wilderness or whatever image we might use also seem to reflect how my inner timescape and mental constructions of the world have been impacted. My brain has felt like the desert in this new experience of the world, like my vision has been clouded, or the horizon of the future has been lost to the dunes and sand. Time has become a vast expanse without recognizable structure. My own sense of time has been more warped than usual. Working second shift can do that to you. And the days seem to pass, but also seem to just be one. Planning is essentially impossible because we don't know how long this will last. And white supremacy culture and capitalism requires us to be able to plan. Without planning, the system crumbles. Without the distraction of deadlines, we might stop living in the sometimes all too matrix-like world we have come to live and work within, and be reminded of the other things that are important. An inability to plan also renders us powerless. We lose all illusions of control that we've had over our lives, and we become anxious. The tools that have been used to keep us focused and productive, it turns out, have been what have rendered us unaware of our power, just as it had done to the Israelites. Liberation from the body-breaking work of enslavement in Egypt wasn't the scariest part. The scariest part was the freedom and power they had to learn to own and use when they left. And although the Israelites wandered through the desert those 40 years and they were together, they were separate from everyone else, or mostly so. They had each other, but they were set apart from the world. Either experience presents its own challenges, and neither allows for a sense of wholeness. We humans are wired in every part of our beings to be together, to be connected, to be in community. And that is exactly what this virus has played on and been fueled by, our need to be together. It spreads like electricity during a lightning storm when we've gathered, and so we must not, or be very careful about how we allow this to happen. We fantasize about what the desert might be like, the chance to get away from the hardships of the world, the difficult people, the waste and fighting and wars and toxicity and the constant noise and doing. Perhaps we think it will be like the log cabin homes and the beautiful pictures we see on Facebook that say to share them if you'd be willing to give up connections to the outside world for a month for $1 million. I think we know now how that would go. Turns out we'd only be comfortable with the idea if we had the chance to plan for it. The truth is, one of the struggles we have with the desert or the wilderness usually is that we are left with one thing: ourselves. And it's more than many people are comfortable with. The inability to plan and the being stuck with ourselves are two factors that are vital in this time, though, because we may, for the first time, really be experiencing the world as it had become: wasteful, full of fighting and war, toxic, full of distractions. Now the failures, like the way capitalism has rotted out the medical industrial complex, are laid bare. The ways that the marginalized and oppressed are often cared for last and least. The way the system is not prepared for large-scale illnesses. The way the system has been carefully rigged so that not everyone survives. And as people are actually experiencing this in real ways right now, the failures of other parts of our social systems are also being exposed. Black men continue to be killed for being and living as Black men. Because time seems in some ways to have been suspended, we cannot hide these truths right now. The news isn't moving at the same 3-minute news cycle we experienced just a few months ago because it can't. And here we are, confronted with ourselves. Confronted with the fact the world that we had been living in and sort of muddling through the parts of it on autopilot, we are aware a new level that the world resembled nothing of the world we wanted to live in. As someone who has experienced both depression and trauma, I know how overwhelming this pandemic can be and has been. I've been struggling to find a way forward myself for these few months. possibly even more than us. Not only has life in general revolved around COVID-19, but because I work in a hospital where every aspect of our work lives functions completely around it. And many of our coping strategies have been washed away in the tidal waves of what we're confronting. A virus that has left hundreds of thousands ill Americans and prevented us from effectively grieving these deaths in a familiar way. A virus that has disrupted our lives and the world, such as it was. A virus whose spread could have been prevented or contained had the infrastructure been in place. All of this rendering so many of us stuck in a way we don't understand or know how to navigate. Our coping strategies and skills are useless, gone, or were never strong enough to support us. The Israelites recognized that their plight was horrible and had cried out to God for generations on generations. When liberation was suddenly offered to them, they were skeptical. The possibility of freedom was uncomfortable, unfamiliar, and frankly, seemed unbelievable. And in fairness, it was only possible because of God's support and interventions for them. Today, we are not dissimilar, pleading to whoever would hear us that the world has become horribly polluted and ravaged by white supremacy culture, including capitalism, that living has become unaffordable and unsustainable, that even more people's lives are at risk than ever before, including those of our children, and that, well, you know, there's no shortage of things that are not right in this world. And this altered timescape that the virus has brought has forced us to stop feeding into all these things, forcing so much of our lives to stop. Even as we grieve, though, liberation is possible. It is as uncomfortable, unfamiliar, and unbelievable as ever. And yet, here it is. Nicola Tolbert, an activist and educator, wrote, "In this country, we treat spirituality as a health additive, like the protein powder you can get sprinkled on your imperial smoothie. For just an extra charge, a little prayer or meditation can make you run better, smoother, in service to the exploitative systems in which we are immersed. No, our spiritual practice is meant to make us dangerous, to temper us like steel into cogs that grind the wheels of injustice to a halt." Dangerous could mean violence, but I don't think that's the idea. I think the idea is for us to find ways to engage our spiritual practices in a way that are meant to transform the world. Offering money to causes is important. Picking up trash and recycling are important. Volunteering with organizations is important. Lots of things are important, but they are not all. Education needs to be done not only on financial literacy, but also to put pressure on organizations and politicians to make change. We need to be educating each other on organizing and protesting and learning to do this effectively. We need to be doing the deepest work, building communities and making resources available justly and equitably. There is so much to do. One moment of liberation does not mean the end of the journey. There's education, organization, collaboration. There's growing food, making meals, serving meals. There is sewing and sign making and baby raising and parent raising and worship leading and politician calling and resource sharing and art making and singing and appliance repairing and transporting and caring for bodies and minds and hearts and spirits. And the list goes on. We will need all of us to do this work. And we have to do it all with the consistency of a healthy, vibrant spiritual practice. We have to do this work daily and for the rest of our lives, just as the Israelites did, just how peoples throughout time have learned to do. We are fortunate to have so many ancestors that we can learn from. And we have to keep bringing more people into the practices, whatever direction that may take. We can recognize the revolution that will bring into being the beloved kingdom only when everyone is needed and has a part. We are only as isolated as we allow ourselves to believe. We cannot give up our power this way. When we lose the aspiration of interdependence, we do become truly isolated, not just in our homes, but in our hearts. We lose. We are lost. Return to the desert to wander without direction. Liberation is possible for all of us when we prioritize our interdependence with each other and all the world. We must never forget this. The world is ours to heal and make anew.
Thank you so much, Reverend Kristina. That was such a powerful message, spiritual practices to engage the world. And I will be thinking about that all this week and beyond. Now it's time for our closing hymn, How Could Anyone, number 1053 in the Teal Hymnal. As I extinguish the chalice, let us join together in our benediction. I reach out a virtual hand to you. Go in peace, go making peace. Live gently, love mightily, and bow to the mystery.